Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Success Harbor Podcast with George Meszaros, where it's all about making success happen for you.
Hi, everyone. This is George Meszaros with Success Harbor, and I have Anthony Carey with me. Anthony is the CEO of Function First Designs. He is the inventor of Cortex, a next-generation fitness and training equipment used by the NFL, MLB, NBA, and Premier League teams. Welcome, and thank you for being here, Anthony.
My pleasure, George. Thanks for having me.
Tell me, please, how you got the idea to develop something like the Cortex.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say if you hear a little bit of noise in the background, I apologize because that's actually people working on the Cortex right now. But it started a long time ago. I'm in the fitness industry, and for a long time I've started to realize that part of what we were doing was a little bit too front to back, what we call uniplanar, meaning that the body was only working in a linear fashion. And I was standing one day in a squat rack and getting ready for a workout, and I realized I wanted to see my hips and my ankles and my knees move a little bit differently, and I had this vision of a skateboard in a bowl. And that eventually led us to where we are today, which was the design of the Cortex and the motion that it creates and how it helps the body.
So what is it about a skateboard and a bowl that intrigued you?
Well, it was a completely unique motion that kind of facilitated changes at the angles of the joints, at the knees, the ankles, and the hips specifically, and then that eventually worked its way up into the spine as well, if you're standing on it, but there's many different positions you can get into. But it's really something that wasn't available. There's nothing else out there that did it, and it helped the body get to places that it wasn't doing very well on its own, and that we as an industry were not providing the proper stimulus for that. So that's where it started, and nobody else had done it, and there was nothing else out there like it, and I just thought, wow, we could make this happen.
So you said that you've been thinking about this for a while. Can you give us an idea? I mean, what year were you starting to think about this, the Cortex?
Well, this was. Sometimes I'm a little embarrassed to admit how long I had it as an idea before we actually, took substantial steps to move forward. But I would say that I had the idea in the late 90s. And then for several years, my partner and I, who was a very good friend of mine and a teammate in college who's an engineer, we just, on weekends, we would tinker around with some, ideas as far as proof of concept. And it took us a while. We finally got a patent after we figured out exactly how we could make it work. We got a patent, and then it was still a few years after that before we actually went to manufacturing.
So give me an idea of those very early days, building that prototype, testing it. What was that experience like? What did you learn from that experience?
Well, we learned that proof of concept is important. And getting, having a great idea that seems like a great idea to you may not be a great idea to everybody else. So while you don't want a bunch of people stepping on your dreams, you still want to get some feedback from others. So, early on we were wise enough to get a non-disclosure that we had people sign, and we shared the idea with people that we thought would be able to provide us with some pretty beneficial feedback in terms of viability of the product, both functionally and economically in the market, and see if they thought that this had a chance and that sort of thing. And of course, the more we played with it, the more we showed it to people, the more feedback we got, the more invested we became, both emotionally and financially, in making it work. So once we got to that part, the weekends and everything, it was a lot of fun trying to figure out the best way to do it and how we could improve upon the product and what we expected it to do and that sort of thing.
Give me an idea of the early feedback that you got. And this was, I would imagine, the prototype that you had. Was it all good? Was it all bad? What were people telling you that kept you going?
Well, we did get a little negative feedback, and some of that was that the early prototype, because we didn't have the handrail with it and that sort of thing, some people thought it was too advanced or too dangerous. And, we realized that a lot of things are like that. So we did get some negative feedback in that respect. We had some we had some. I have a mentor which I recommend to everybody who is extremely successful in our industry, who is the person that I look to for the most in terms of guidance. And early on, he was somebody that saw the benefits of it and understood it. I think when you get negative feedback, you have to run it through your personal and professional filter and see, also understand where the other folks are coming from. Do they have enough information? Are they looking at it through a singular lens? And we still get that today. And what I mean by that is because of the motion of what the Cortex does, a lot of people just look at it as an advanced balance board. And it's so far from that. But when that's the only lens that they have on when they look at your product or your service, that's all they see. And so as a business owner and an inventor, part of my responsibility within the marketing message is for people to see the advantages way beyond just what they see as the obvious thing you would do with it.
Describe the Cortex for those obviously this is audio, so people can't see it. They can go to cortexfitness.com to check it out. But before they do that, I want them to listen to this audio and describe it to the listener. What is Cortex? How does it work? What does it do?
Well, imagine a bowl with a lid on the top. So that the lid on the top is your platform, and that bowl sits in another ring that has 3 ball transfers that that the bottom of the bowl sits on. And in the middle of the bottom of the bowl is a center dowel, and that's your safety piece. So what happens is if you imagine a bowl sitting in almost another bowl, but the bottom bowl has wheels in it, the top bowl will tilt sideways, so if there was water on top, the water would run off to one side, but at the same time, the bowl can also slide across a certain distance on the other bowl. And then, because they're both round, it rotates unrestricted in a 360 degrees. So you can imagine if somebody's standing on it, it is like an advanced balance board. But because of the size of it, which it's about 30 inches across in diameter, that people can lay on it. You can do a lot of upper body activities with your hands on it and your feet on the floor, and there's multiple positions you can consume it in. So the value to the end user is the fact that it creates all this variability in both their musculoskeletal system as well as their nervous system or our software. So, for example, if you were doing a push-up, George, and you did 10 push-ups on the floor, but you did 10 push-ups on the Cortex, the 10 push-ups on the Cortex would be like 10 different exercises.
Okay. I have an exercise ball. I use it in my office. I sit on it, and, I think it's great. But when I look at the Cortex, I feel like I could do things on the Cortex I couldn't do on the exercise ball. And I'm not trying to turn this into a commercial, but, there is no way I could stand on that exercise ball unless I worked for Cirque du Soleil or something. So, I can see myself do a variety of different workouts that would build, work my core, but not I couldn't do on an exercise ball. Were you thinking about that, or does that come into the equation at all?
It does, because we spend and exercise balls are great, and we use them in my studio as well. But they are, they're round and they're squishy, and the difference between the Cortex is the top is flat and hard, which therefore mimics closer to what the ground is that we're on a regular basis. So in terms of the expectations of the body, at a certain level, there's advantages to that. And of course, the Cortex you can lift up and put on a table, and as I said, you can lay on it, and there's a bunch of different things you can do in that respect too.
So I want to ask you about patenting and manufacturing. Did you have a patent before you went into manufacturing? What is your recommendation on the order of those things when you have a product that you want to create?
I absolutely recommend getting a patent, if not a pending patent. Especially if you're going to manufacture outside of the United States, if you're going to go abroad for your manufacturing, which unfortunately is a reality now just because of cost for a lot of us. We have some of the parts are manufactured in the U.S., some of the parts are manufactured overseas. But either way, the U.S. in almost every market is the largest, and particularly in our market, in the fitness market and physical therapy market that I use is by far the largest market. So there was no question that we were going to make sure that we had the and what's called there's 2 kinds of patents. There's a utility and there's a design patent. And the utility patent is a much stronger patent because it it doesn't just cover sort of the look or the design, but it also covers what it can do or the utility of the piece that you're applying for. So we get very broad claims on it, meaning that we're very well protected. And we, as I mentioned earlier, that was something we did a couple years before we actually went to manufacturing, because we wanted to make sure that we had the protection and nobody else was going to be able to sort of take our idea of what we did, and that's the reality of it. So getting a good intellectual property attorney is a must.
Now, can you give us an idea of going from prototype to product? What was that process like? How long did it take? What were some of the challenges?
Well, I think every situation is going to be a little bit different. If you have the financial resources, you have 100% focus on that product, and that's what you're going to do. It certainly can be expedited a lot faster. For me, it was still running my other business, and as I mentioned, kind of it was a weekend and evening sort of thing, and trying to get, because my partner, who's a brilliant engineer, but he's not in the fitness industry and didn't see the vision up front that I did, took him a little while to get on board. But what we did is we had a proof of concept, and that means that we, through tinkering around the garage with plywood and a fan base, and we took pieces and parts of different things, and we said, okay, we can see that it works. And from there, we put together, or he put together the appropriate CAD drawings, and then we, fortunately for me, he's already in manufacturing, so we had a lot of shortcuts in that term. If we had to go through the entire process, if I personally had to go through the entire learning curve and process of sourcing out manufacturing and how you get design done and all that, it would have taken us longer. So that was a huge benefit to us. But once we did have the working, or the proof of concept, then what we did is we got some working prototypes from our manufacturer. And so this is where they kind of make you just, a handful, whether it's 1 or 5 of your product, which are very expensive when you're only getting a couple made like that. But now you have something tangible that's almost the end product. And now you get to play around with that a little bit and fine-tune things a little bit more. And then when you've had that opportunity, you can send back some minor changes to the manufacturer, and then you pull the trigger on the full-blown manufacturing run for quantity of product.
Are you still working with the same manufacturer or not from the beginning?
We are. We're still working with the same manufacturer, and as I said, because of my partner's experience and history with manufacturing, we're very happy, fortunately, with our manufacturing partner overseas, and they've been very supportive of us, very trustworthy, and we have a great relationship with them. And I know that's not true for everybody. There's a lot of
people. I mean, you hear stories all the time when people are on the second or third manufacturer for one reason or the other. So it sounds like a kind of a really unusual story, but I mean it's great. Talk about some of the challenges of introducing something entirely new to the market, because the Cortex is something entirely new. It's almost like you have to educate people before they can buy your product. How is that experience?
Well, that's very well said, because if any of the folks that are listening familiar with fitness in general, there's been a big shift in sort of the overall paradigm. So exercise pieces of equipment have become simpler in a lot of ways, which means that they can do more, as opposed to, say, a leg extension machine in the gym, where it's a very highly engineered piece, but it does pretty much one thing, and we call those idiot-proof, meaning that you can just pretty much look at the picture, get on there, and do it. Okay, but it costs several $1,000s for a piece of equipment that has a big footprint and does one thing. Now, when you look at a lot of the different equipment, they do a bunch of stuff. They're less expensive, but if there's not education around it, people will use it for one or two things, and therefore it doesn't seem as valuable as you might think. So introducing something new to the market continues to be something that we have to work on in educating our potential customers and with the branding, and it's not easy. The advantage that we had, because our first market that we go to is the fitness and then the physical therapy, and then there's some other smaller markets that we're in as well. But fortunately, I'd been in the fitness industry for many years and had had the opportunity to teach and present around the world, actually. So there was a little bit of validation brought to the product because of of me, which I say humbly. But at the same time, there's still so many people that haven't heard of it or don't quite understand it, and so you've got to market it a certain way. The branding that you're doing, and then you got to be present at a lot of events and trade shows and give people a chance to touch, feel, and see what it does.
So, how important is it to get the NFL, MLB, NBA, and other types of teams to use your product? And what is the process of getting there?
Well, for us, it was. It wasn't like we went out and knocked on doors. Fortunately for us, some of the guys from the NFL and whatnot have seen us at trade shows, so for their specific industries, for the strength and conditioning coaches and the athletic trainers, and they loved the product. And, they saw the value and they want the best for their athletes, so they were able to get it. It's not easy to get things in with Major League Baseball or football. It's an individual choice made by the staff, and if they see the value of it. And that's different than Gatorade or Reebok or somebody going in there spending millions and millions of dollars for sponsorship. So when you have the best in the world using your product, there's no doubt that you want to let other people know that, because that's third-party validation. And these are people whose lives revolve around their body, and they're worth millions of dollars. And so for them to be able to use it and see the benefit of it is something that we're quite proud of. And we hope it grows more and more as more and more of them find out about it.
Now, who is your market? Is the market the consumer, or is it more professionals that provide services to individuals or teams?
Yeah. Right now, currently with the model, it's what we would consider our commercial model, and that's something that would be used by professionals with either their clients or their athletes or their patients in a physical therapy setting. We have in our business plan, and we're working towards a consumer model, which would be a smaller, less expensive, a little bit more simpler version of what we have that we eventually bring to the consumer market.
Okay. Now, so far it sounds like things have gone really well, but there are always challenges. Can you give me one of the biggest mistakes or the biggest mistake you made in this business with the Cortex?
Well, I would say that probably the biggest mistake, and it was sort of a mistake, but we kind of knew what was going on, would be, and I've said this, I'm actually had the opportunity to speak on this topic for several magazines, and I think the biggest mistake that any of us can make is the fact that we put our heart and soul into the development and manufacturing of the product and get it looking pretty and doing everything we want to do, and then we put in our order and think that, okay, now the money's just going to come flooding in. And in reality, it's just a new beginning, because now it's a full-time responsibility to market this thing and sell it and educate your potential consumer who's going to use it. So, not setting aside the right budget and funds and time for what you need to do can be a huge mistake. And we fell into that trap a little bit. It was such a big deal getting the product actually manufactured. Well, it felt like such a big accomplishment anyway, that we had some catalog companies that had it, and we just thought that meant the orders were going to pour in, and in reality that's just the start, and they're just one they're just one part of the puzzle. You've got to do a lot of it, and they're counting on you to do a lot of it, so the whole marketing part of it and promotion is ongoing and full time.
It's almost like the book publishing business. People think if they get a publisher to publish their book, then the publisher will sell the book. But really, it's up to the author to do the selling, isn't it? It's
exactly the same. I've had that same experience on that side of things as well.
So right now, today, how do you market the Cortex? What is your growth strategy or marketing strategy?
Well, both domestically and internationally, you have what are called distributors. So they're your catalog companies and your websites that sell multiple products, and they help promote you through their print and web-based marketing, and they get a certain margin for that. We also do some print and obviously lots of social media stuff. which is inexpensive, and the biggest cost is actually the trade shows, and we have a sales team along with myself. Often we go to these trade shows, and because people will see what the Cortex does on the video, and they'll say, "Wow, that's pretty neat." Well, they'll see it in pictures first, and they'll say, I wonder what that does. See it in video, oh, that makes more sense. But then when they get on it, it's an exponentially different experience. So that's still part of what we need to do, because it's a very tactile, it's a very kinesthetic piece of equipment, which means that people need to experience it. So the trade shows and the travel that's associated with that around the country, getting the booth and getting people on it and that sort of thing is a big part of it. And from there, at the same time, we're also working on, commercial fitness equipment retail outlets. So here in San Diego, we have things like Busybody, and there's, groups of stores like that throughout the country that also sell people either to small fitness facilities or to people that want a little bit more commercially based equipment in their home gyms and that sort of thing. So essentially, it's multiple irons in the fire at all times, and it's ongoing.
So let's talk about fulfillment. How do you handle it? Is it done in-house? Do you have a fulfillment house? What issues have you had with order fulfillment?
What we've ended up doing initially, we tried to do it a little bit in-house, and it, just as volume grows, it's something you need professionals to do. So we use a fulfillment company here in San Diego. We bring our product in from overseas to the Port of Long Beach, comes down to the fulfillment place in Poway, and they just do a great job. We get an order, or our distributor needs a certain amount of product, we send it to them. You certainly pay for their services, but at the same time they get discounts on shipping charges because of the volume that they do. They do a great job of tracking everything, and when you get reports every month how much went out and where and all that sort of thing. So you can start out at home or out of your garage or try to do it yourself and have UPS, and depending on the size of the product and the volume that you're doing. But it's just one of those things that would eat up a bunch of our time, that it's well worth it to pay somebody else who does it well. And because they're doing a lot of other things, they're very efficient at it, and the cost per piece is not that high.
Now, can you give us an idea of how many Cortexes you sold over the years?
We've sold, I'd have to find out the numbers that we've just finished last year with, and even into Q1, but we're probably somewhere around 1,200 to 1,400 units. Which, when people hear that number, some people say, "Wow, that's a lot." Other people say, "Wow, that's not that many." And because of the numbers, the way we started out, we've seen about each year back and forth between 20 to 30% growth to get to the numbers that we need to get at, and those numbers include international and domestic. But you're looking at a $700 product, so it's not like people are buying 10 of them at a time for different places. We're not hugely expensive, but it's more than buying a Bosu ball or a foam roller or a stability ball like you're sitting on, which you can get for $19 in some places.
Okay. Now, give us owning your own business is kind of a roller coaster, right? There are a lot of ups and downs. How do you deal with that as a business owner?
That's a great question. I do my best. I've owned my other business now for 20 years, the fitness studio, and so it's the same thing. We've had a lot of ups and downs. You got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in your team. You got to believe that you're doing the right things, and you got to seek advice from your mentors and your financial advisors for certain things, and you got to keep your eye on the prize, the main objective, even if that means that you get bumped off course every once in a while a little bit. But there's no question there's ups and downs, and there's some days you think, wow, are we going to make it? And there's other days you're like, we're killing this thing, and we're going to kill it. But overall, I have so much passion about the product and what it does and its benefits that it's not the product itself. It is being a better entrepreneur and executing what needs to be executed upon as an entrepreneur to really make it to the next level.
Tell me what was the greatest high that you had with the Cortex, as either as a business or as a product or as a personal accomplishment?
I think probably there was a couple. Certainly the first time that we took it to a trade show where some of the most influential people in the industry were coming by, and there's tremendous amount of interest in it. That first show, we were pretty excited about that. Another one was where we saw Kelly Slater, the world's greatest surfer, using it. That was pretty cool. And then another time was that just last year, the largest publication in the United Kingdom had us written up as one of the top 10 fitness trends for the year, and had pictures of us, and it was all over the UK magazines and their website, and because of our affiliation with the Virgin Active clubs over there.
What's the name of the magazine or the publication?
The Metro.
The Metro.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tell me, either in your own business, but maybe even other businesses that in your own network, what do you think is the biggest time waster for entrepreneurs?
It's a good question. I think sometimes for me, I would say it gets caught up a little bit too much of the tactical stuff, and this probably sounds familiar, and not enough of the strategy stuff, where we should be delegating more of the tactical stuff to people, and we've gotten better at that. But returning a phone call that somebody else could return for you, same with emails and that sort of thing. I think really when you want to do it because it makes you feel like you're in touch and checking something off your task list, but in reality it's something that somebody else could be doing, where strategically I could be having a lot more influence on the company. And I think sometimes we get drawn to little things like that are tiny little victories over the course of the day, which are nice for our ego, but they're not great for the business in the long run.
Okay. If you would start Cortex all over, what would you do differently?
I think I would have done more research and understood the funding market better. So we're still in the process of wanting to get some outside funding to further grow the business. And I think that, and it's a huge learning curve for me because it's so outside my wheelhouse, and I'm getting help with that and coaching and that sort of thing. But overall, I think I would understand that and run that course parallel with the business as we launched it. We came out just as the financial crisis was just full blown, affecting everybody, and even thinking about trying to get people to invest in you at that point. But even if I didn't understand the game enough. So now I have a better understanding, and we are moving towards that. But it's so foreign to anything that I've really had to study in depth that there's a big learning curve for me. So I would have spent more time understanding what it means to communicate with investors, to present to investors, to know what investors are looking for, and that sort of thing.
If a good friend came to you, or maybe even somebody from your family that has a job now but wants to be an entrepreneur, what would be the first thing that you would teach that person?
To gauge their timelines with a dose of reality, and give themselves a little bit of cushion for whatever they were thinking of doing. So if they thought they were going to start a business in a month, I'd have them really look at where it was they needed to be and what they needed to do in what time frame to actually start making money and cover their costs and their expenses. I think a lot of people get into it and they think starting a business means immediate income generation, and they don't allow for the time that they need to ramp up into a full-blown revenue-generating business. And by setting realistic expectations in their timeline, they won't be disappointed, they won't be discouraged, and they may not throw in the towel too early. But they've got to have those expectations and of course the cushion financially to lean on until they get to that point.
Do you have maybe a favorite book that helped you with your business over the years?
That's a good question. There's probably not a single book. There's a couple things, and although he does have a book, I'm trying to think of the author's name, Michael Gerber and the E-Myth. A lot of your folks are probably familiar with that. I'm sure you are. That's always been, and I listened to it more than once. It's really the same thing that's in his book, but I've listened to it on disc. That it changes your mindset. He talks about the E-Myth meaning that it's the entrepreneur myth, and that we tend to be technicians instead of true business people, and that was very true for me. Being somebody that's in the fitness industry, the next step was to own either my own business or start my own product. And instead of thinking strategically about the business, you're just in doing it every day. And that was a tremendous resource to just switch your mindset a little bit and think about. And the exercises that he takes you through and that sort of thing was very valuable early on to just think differently about being in business.
I want to ask you about maybe the future, 5-10 years from now, and the Cortex. If you could draw it, what would it look like?
Well, in 5 years, I would like to think that we're a part of a standard piece of equipment that you see in health clubs throughout the world, and equally it'll be in every physical therapy rehabilitation place throughout the country and internationally as well, and that's all part of it. And then this consumer version, though, within the next 5 years will be developed, and you might see that on TV. You're certainly going to see it in your Dick's Sporting Goods, your sports chalets, and that sort of thing. And it'll be one of those pieces of equipment that people have in their home, and they can do so many things on it and slide it under the bed as well. So we really feel like if you can make exercise fun and engaging for people, that's part of the process, and the Cortex does that. So we see, with a little bit of kickstart, with some funding, literally see 300%, 400%, 500% growth within the next 5 to 10 years, both internationally and domestically.
Now, is this consumer version would be something that would fit with like a Kickstarter or something along those lines, or have you considered anything like that? The
Yes.
crowdfunding option?
Yes, and that's one of the other branches to this learning curve that I'm having, looking at funding and what kind of things you want, with what they're looking for and what's acceptable to put up on their sites, and we actually even have a third application besides just the consumer version for this. We also see this technology actually to be something that we can put into a seat on a smaller version of it, and you put it at the seat of a chair, and instead of sitting on a ball, is that it can be active sitting, where you're using where your hips can move in those different directions. You can still have a backrest if you want it, and so that's a whole nother aspect of the business that we should be tapping into in that 5-year mark as well.
Wow, that's actually sounds really revolutionary, and I'd love to see that and try that when you have something. Do you have any last words of wisdom to share, or maybe even encouragement for people that either want to take their business to the next level or just to start a business?
Well, I think there's two kinds of people that start businesses, and this is purely, just my observation, but two kinds of people that start businesses. One is the person that just loves what they do so much and they want to be their own boss, and they continue fixing cars or cutting hair or, designing websites or whatever it is. And then you have the other kind of person that really sees, just really looks at the spreadsheets and the P&Ls, and they see that opportunity and they enjoy that side of it. And
as long as you enjoy what you're doing, but you see where your shortcomings are. So if you just look at P&Ls and you have real no passion behind your business, and it's that at some point may be something that has you jumping from business to business, and if you're somebody that's too engulfed in doing the day-to-day work and being a technician, there's probably a ceiling on the success in terms of in the financial aspect of it. So I think there's a really sweet spot between understanding the numbers and understanding the strategy of business and having some passion for what you're doing as part of that business. And for me, it's certainly helping people, and that's what we do, and people getting healthier and making exercise fun and productive. At the same time, the learning curve for me was, hey, you need to step back and look at your numbers a little bit more and understand that side of the business as well. There's a sweet spot in there, I think.
So how can people connect with you? How can people find out more about the Cortex? How can people demand the Cortex so their own gym carries at least a few of them to try?
I like that, George. Demand it. They should go in there and pound on the manager's desk and say, hey, we need a Cortex in here. But they can get plenty of information, videos, and see who's using it, and some of the applications of it at cortexfitness.com. And there's there's links to so much of the media coverage that we've had as well. And there's and it's in clubs around the country. It's not as where we want it everywhere yet, but for example, some of the Equinox clubs are using it, and California fitness clubs at Northern California are using it. Fit here in San Diego is using it, and a lot of smaller studios are using it around. But take a look at it and see what it does, and see the advantages, and that's where they're going to be able to find all kinds of information about it. And of course, we have a Facebook page as well.
Well, thank you, Anthony. I appreciate you sharing your story with us. And everybody, be sure to check out cortexfitness.com and demand to have a Cortex in your gym or physical therapist everywhere, because it's a great product, and Anthony's a great guy. Thank you, Anthony.
George, it was my pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity.
Bye.